The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across my grandmother's antique dining table as I carefully arranged the photo albums I'd spent weeks preparing. Tonight was supposed to be special, my parents' 25th wedding anniversary, and I had planned every detail of this surprise celebration. Extended family filled the living room, their laughter mixing with the gentle clink of champagne glasses and the soft jazz playing from the vintage record player. I had worked for months on this surprise, not just the party itself, but something far more personal. After years of feeling like the forgotten middle child, overshadowed by my older brother's medical career and my younger sister's artistic achievements, I had finally found something that would make my parents proud. According to YouTube analytics, 99.5% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. My startup company had just been acquired for $12 million, and tonight I plan to announce my success and gift them the deed to the beach house they'd always dreamed of owning. "Maya, sweetheart, these photos are beautiful," Aunt Rachel said, thumbing through one of the albums. Each page chronicled my parents' journey together, from their college romance to building their small accounting firm, raising 3 children, and weathering life's storms side by side. I'd interviewed relatives, tracked down old friends, and even commissioned a local artist to restore their faded wedding photos. My mother, Elena, glided through the room in her elegant navy dress, accepting congratulations and compliments. My father, Robert, stood near the fireplace, regaling Uncle Jim with stories from their early marriage. They looked radiant, genuinely happy, and my heart swelled with anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, tapping my champagne flute with a silver spoon. The room gradually quieted, faces turning toward me with warm, expectant smiles. "If I could have your attention for just a moment." I pulled out the sealed envelope containing the beach house deed, my hands trembling slightly with excitement. This was my moment. The moment I'd prove that I wasn't just the quiet, overlooked middle child anymore. I'd made something of myself, and I wanted to share this triumph with the 2 people who had shaped my life. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice thick with emotion. 25 years ago, you 2 began a journey together that created not just a beautiful marriage, but a family that—" The sentence died in my throat as I saw my parents exchange a look. Not the tender, appreciative glance I'd expected, but something else entirely. My mother's eyebrows rose slightly, and my father's mouth quirked into what I could only describe as a smirk. "Oh, honey," my mother said, stepping forward with that particular tone she used when she was about to deliver disappointing news. "We need to tell you something before you continue." The room seemed to hold its breath. I felt the envelope in my hands, still warm from my nervous grip, and waited. "Your father and I have decided to separate," she announced matter-of-factly. "We're getting divorced." We were planning to tell everyone tonight, after the party. This seemed like as good an opportunity as any to gather the family. The words hit me like a physical blow. Around us, gasps echoed through the room, but I barely heard them over the roaring in my ears. I stared at my parents, who stood side by side, yet somehow seemed miles apart. "We've grown apart over the years," my father added, his voice casual, almost bored. "We've been living separate lives for quite some time now." This party tonight. Well, we figured it might as well serve as a goodbye celebration, too. My aunt dropped her champagne glass, the crystal shattering against the hardwood floor with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud. Uncle Jim muttered something under his breath that sounded like profanity. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what I was hearing. "The timing might seem awkward," my mother continued, and there was that smirk again. "But honestly, Maya, you've always been a bit dramatic about these family gatherings." We thought it might be easier to just rip the Band-Aid off. Dramatic. The word echoed in my head. All those months of planning, of staying up late designing invitations, of calling distant relatives, of pouring my heart into those photo albums. Dramatic. In fact, my father said, checking his watch, we should probably start dividing up some of the gifts people brought. No point in pretending anymore. That's when I noticed it, the way they looked at each other, the barely concealed satisfaction in their expressions. This wasn't just a marriage ending. This was something they had orchestrated. They had known I was planning this party. They had let me spend months preparing. Let me invite everyone. Let me craft this beautiful celebration of their love story, all while knowing they intended to destroy it. "Oh, sorry," my mother said, finally noticing my stricken expression. Her voice carried that false, syrupy sweetness she used when she was being particularly cruel. "It was just an accident that we're telling everyone tonight. We forgot you had put so much work into this little party." Accident. Little party. Something cold and sharp crystallized in my chest. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. The deed to the beach house worth nearly $1 million, purchased with money from my successful business that they knew nothing about, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. So I started to speak, then stopped. The room was watching me, family members looking between my parents and me, with expressions ranging from shock to pity. My younger sister Emma was crying quietly in the corner. My brother Marcus looked like he wanted to punch something, but I didn't finish the sentence. Instead, I carefully placed the envelope in my purse, set down my champagne glass, and walked to the kitchen. I needed air, space, time to think. Behind me, I could hear my parents, already beginning to hold court, explaining their decision to the gathered relatives with the same casual indifference they might use to discuss changing cable providers. No mention of counseling, no sadness, no acknowledgement of the devastation they were causing, not just to me, but to everyone who had gathered to celebrate their love. In the kitchen, I leaned against the marble counter and tried to breathe. 25 years of marriage, 3 children, decades of family memories, and they were dissolving it like sugar in water at what was supposed to be their anniversary party. A party I had planned as a gesture of love and appreciation. My phone buzzed with a text from my business partner, congratulating me on the acquisition closing and asking how the surprise announcement had gone. I stared at the message and felt something harden inside me. They thought I was dramatic? They thought my carefully planned gesture was just a little party? They had used my love and effort as a convenient backdrop for their cruelty? I thought about the beach house, the one my mother had dreamed about for years, cutting pictures out of magazines and talking wistfully about morning walks along the shore. The one my father had promised her they'd buy someday when the business really takes off. The house I had purchased in their names, ready to hand over as proof that their middle child had finally made something of herself. As I stood there, listening to their voices carrying from the living room as they casually dismantled 25 years of marriage in front of our entire extended family, I made a decision. If they wanted to treat this night as an ending, then I would give them an ending they'd never forget. I pulled out my phone and sent 3 text messages. The first was to my real estate attorney, asking him to prepare new paperwork for the beach house. The second was to my financial advisor. The third was to a private investigator I'd used for due diligence during the business acquisition, someone discreet and very good at finding information people preferred to keep hidden. Then I returned to the living room, where my parents were now sitting on the sofa like a divorced couple already, maintaining careful distance between them while explaining to Grandma Rose why her granddaughter and son-in-law wouldn't be celebrating any more anniversaries. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Before you continue, I think there's something our guests should know." My mother looked annoyed at the interruption. Maya, we're in the middle of explaining. I know exactly what you're explaining, I said, pulling out my phone. But I think everyone should understand the full picture of what's really happening here. I had spent the last 30 minutes in that kitchen doing more than just breathing. I had made calls, sent emails, and used resources that most people don't have access to. When you've just sold a tech company for $12 million, you develop a network of very capable people who can get you information quickly. You see, I continued, looking directly at my father. I was curious about the timing of this announcement, so I made a few calls to some friends in the financial industry. My father's smirk faltered slightly. It turns out that 3 weeks ago, Dad opened a new business account. Interesting timing, don't you think? Right around the time Mom started looking at apartments across town. The room had gone completely silent. Even the jazz music seemed to have faded to nothing. But here's the really interesting part, I said, consulting my phone as if reading from notes. That business account? It's not just for Dad's accounting firm. It's a joint account with someone named Jessica Chen. Jessica Chen, who happens to be Mom's yoga instructor and meditation coach. My mother's face went white. And Mom, I continued, turning to her with a smile that probably looked as cold as I felt. Your new apartment lease is quite interesting too, because according to public records, it's not just your name on that lease. It's also signed by David Martinez, Emma's former high school principal, who's now working as an educational consultant. The silence in the room was deafening. My grandmother's hand was pressed to her heart, and Uncle Jim was slowly shaking his head. So, when you say you've grown apart, I said, making air quotes, what you really mean is that you've both been having affairs, and you decided to use tonight, my carefully planned anniversary celebration, as the most convenient time to announce your mutual betrayal, not just of each other, but of your entire family. My father stood up abruptly. Maya, you have no right. No right? I laughed, and the sound surprised even me with its bitterness. No right to investigate why my parents chose to destroy their marriage at a party I spent months planning. No right to wonder why two people who supposedly love their children would choose to devastate them in front of the entire extended family. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. You know what I was going to give you tonight? I held up the deed. The beach house on Sunset Drive. The one with the wraparound porch and the garden you always dreamed about, Mom. The one where you said you'd want to grow old together, Dad. My mother's eyes widened. Maya, you couldn't possibly have $12 million, I said simply. That's what my company sold for last month. I bought your dream house with the intention of giving it to you tonight as a celebration of your love story and an apology for all the years I felt like I disappointed you. The room was so quiet, I could hear the antique clock ticking in the hallway. But you know what? I continued, sliding the deed back into my purse. I've decided this house will serve a different purpose. I'm donating it to a charity that helps children whose families have been destroyed by divorce. They'll turn it into a retreat center where kids can go to heal from the trauma their parents inflicted on them. My mother stood up, her face flushed. You can't do that. That house. It was supposed to be for you, I finished. Yes, it was. Just like this party was supposed to be for you. Just like my love and respect and years of feeling like I had to prove myself to you were supposed to be for you. But apparently, you don't actually want any of those things. I looked around the room at the faces of my relatives, some shocked, some angry, some nodding in what looked like approval. There's more, I said, pulling out my phone again. You see, when you spend $12 million on a house, You develop relationships with people who have access to all sorts of information. Financial records, for instance. My father started to speak, but I held up my hand. Dad, that business loan you took out 6 months ago, using the family business as collateral, the one you told Mom was for expansion, it was actually to pay for your girlfriend's daughter's private school tuition and to lease her that BMW she's been driving around town. My father's face had gone from pale to red to purple. And Mom, those meditation retreats you've been attending, the ones that cost thousands of dollars each month, they've actually been weekend trips to David's cabin in the mountains, paid for, incidentally, with money from the college funds you and Dad set up for Emma. My sister gasped from her corner, and my brother Marcus stood up, his hands clenched into fists. So when you stand there and tell our family that you're getting divorced because you've grown apart, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word, what you're really saying is that you're both thieves and liars who have been stealing from your own children to fund your affairs. The room erupted. Uncle Jim started shouting at my father. Aunt Rachel was comforting my sobbing grandmother. Emma was crying harder now, and Marcus looked like he was ready to hit something. But my parents just stood there, caught between their lies and their shame, probably realizing for the first time that their quiet, overlooked middle child had just systematically destroyed whatever narrative they had planned to tell about their divorce. Maya, my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. We never meant for... Never meant for what? I interrupted. Never meant to get caught? Never meant for your children to find out that everything about your marriage was a lie? Never meant to have to face the consequences of your actions? I walked over to the photo albums I had spent so many hours creating, picked them up, and held them against my chest. These albums contain 25 years of memories, I said. Pictures of family vacations, graduations, birthdays, holidays. Pictures of two people who promised to love, honor, and cherish each other, and who promised their children that family meant something. I looked directly at each of my parents in turn. But you know what I realized tonight? These aren't pictures of a marriage, they're pictures of a performance. And apparently, the show is finally over. I handed the albums to my grandmother. Grandma Rose, these belong to you now. You're the only person in this room who actually understands what love and commitment mean. My grandmother took the albums with shaking hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. Oh, Maya, she whispered. I turned back to my parents one final time. You wanted to use my party as the backdrop for your big announcement? Fine. But let me make an announcement of my own. I pulled out the business card my lawyer had given me earlier and held it up. This is the card for one of the best divorce attorneys in the state. I've already retained her services, not for you, but for myself. Because as of tonight, I'm divorcing you too. The room went silent again. I'm done, I continued. Done pretending that family means something to people who use it as a weapon. Done trying to earn love and respect from people who are incapable of giving it. Done being the child who apologizes for existing while you two destroy everything that should have been sacred. I picked up my purse and headed toward the door. Maya, wait, my father called out, his voice cracking. You can't just... I turned around one last time. Can't just what? Can't just leave? Can't just cut ties with people who have proven they don't deserve to be in my life? Can't just protect myself from parents who treat their children like inconveniences? I looked around the room at my extended family, most of whom were staring at my parents with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. Actually, I said, I can do all of those things, and I will. As I reached the door, I paused and looked back. Oh, and Mom? Dad? That beach house I'm donating? The one that was supposed to be your dream home? I'm going to make sure they put up a plaque. It will read, "In memory of families destroyed by selfishness and lies. May the children who come here find the love and stability their parents failed to provide." I walked out of that house and didn't look back. 3 months later, I received a letter from my parents' lawyers claiming I had humiliated and defamed them at the anniversary party. They wanted compensation for emotional distress and demanded that I reverse the donation of the beach house. I forwarded the letter to my attorney, who responded with a detailed accounting of all the financial damage they had caused to their own children through their fraudulent activities. She also included a comprehensive dossier of evidence regarding their respective affairs, including receipts, photographs, and testimony from witnesses who were prepared to testify in court if necessary. We never heard from their lawyers again. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that anniversary party. My parents split their remaining assets down the middle, which wasn't much after they paid back the money they had stolen from Emma's college fund and settled various debts they had accumulated during their respective affairs. Jessica Chen moved in with my father, and David Martinez moved in with my mother. Neither relationship lasted more than a year after they were no longer forbidden and exciting. My siblings and I grew closer after that night. Emma finished high school and decided to attend college in California, as far from our parents as she could get. Marcus quit his residency program and opened a free clinic in an underserved community, saying he wanted to do something that actually mattered. We all agreed that family wasn't about blood or obligation, it was about the people who showed up for you when life got difficult. The Beach House Retreat Center opened a year later. I attended the dedication ceremony, where I met dozens of children whose parents had put their own selfish desires ahead of their family's well-being. Many of them told me that having a safe place to process their trauma had literally saved their lives. As for my parents, I occasionally hear updates through distant relatives. They both remarried eventually. Different people, not the ones they had affairs with. They both claimed to have learned from their mistakes and wanted to rebuild relationships with their children. But some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. Not because of the fire itself, but because of what the fire revealed, that the bridge was never as strong as you believed it to be. On quiet evenings, I sometimes think about that anniversary party, the moment when everything I thought I knew about my family collapsed in a single conversation. I think about the months I spent planning that celebration, the love and hope I poured into those photo albums, the dreams I had of finally earning my parents' pride and approval. And then I think about the life I've built since then, the success I achieved through my own efforts, the relationships based on honesty and mutual respect, the peace that comes from surrounding myself with people who understand that love is not a performance, but a choice made every single day. That night, my parents smirked and said, "Oh, sorry, it was just an accident." So I decided to show them what an accident actually looked like. The accidental discovery of their lies, the accidental exposure of their betrayal, and the accidental consequence of losing their children forever. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't planned at all. Sometimes it's simply choosing to value yourself more than the people who never valued you in the first place. And sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can possibly do.